Hello, everybody. So I know most of you, but I'm John Clapp. I'm Associate Dean for Research here in the college and professor. And this is Kevin Pacino, who's a professor in electrical and computer engineering. And so what we want to talk today about is a bunch of things, actually, that are related to potential social work engineering collaborations. So this, for all you social work folks, is kind of a new area. There's actually 2 schools in the country that have hired engineers in the last year to be on their faculty. Kevin showed up at my office very shortly after I got here, and we had some interesting conversations. And the more we talk and talk with other people in the field, there really does seem to be a lot of different potential crossovers. So we're going to kind of talk a little bit about some of the work he's doing over in engineering, some of the potential crossover for students, for faculty, for research, for academic programs, and then hopefully give you an example of some of the research we're doing together. It comes a little bit out of my work, and then leave enough time for hopefully a rich discussion at the end. So I think
you want to overview before we go to the next.
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to comment about a few things. I think there's at OSU, we're big, as everybody knows, and it's hard to understand different units at OSU. It's impossible to understand them all. But so just to give you a little intro to College of Engineering, to give a sense of what we are and do, I want to give you some statistics. I looked them up this morning. So number of students is about a little over 10,000. So 1/5 of OSU is in the College of Engineering. 8,000 of those are undergrad, 2,000 are grad students. Undergrad, per gender, 20% women, okay? Undergrad only, okay? There's been many initiatives to try to change that. That's viewed as we really try to encourage women to join College of Engineering. At the graduate level, it's 25% women. At the undergraduate level, we're about 10% international. At the graduate level, we are 60% international, okay? And that's very standard across the country. That's not unusual at all. So in the college is broken up into 10 departments. So just anywhere you look around and see a technology, it's a department. So the computer, there's 2 departments. I'm in electrical and computer engineering. And then there's also computer science and engineering. Okay, there's some pretty distinct differences in those cases and some significant crossover too. But there's mechanical engineering, aerospace engineering, everything from chemical engineering, civil engineering, environmental engineering, material science and engineering, industrial engineering, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so there's all these divisions and big silos, and we don't talk to each other either, okay? So that's just, well, I'm exaggerating somewhat, but you know how OSU is. It's largely true. It's hard for me to collaborate with the guy sitting in the office next to me, let alone. So that's sort of how we break up, and I can tell you that, you know, in the College of Engineering does collaborations outside of engineering, but it's where it's happening is with College of Medicine, primarily some in ag. I'm probably going to miss some here. With the sciences, physics, not too much with mathematics. It used to be more with mathematics. So there is a number of collaborations, but to my knowledge, the only collaboration that's happening between social work and engineering is with John and I. And so this is sort of, like John said, it's a brainstorming session. These are ideas, okay? This is exploratory. It's hard to figure out how to collaborate across disciplines like this because of the communication problem between us. We speak different languages, you know, and have different traditions.
Math and English. So.
Yeah. Math and English. Math is a problem, okay? There's a difference between your requirements, for instance, for statistics and the requirements in engineering. The typical requirements are a year of calculus and differential equations and maybe numerical analysis for an undergraduate. At the graduate level, they take a lot of math in a lot of cases. Okay, so anyway.
All right, so go ahead. I'll take this slide, and then Kevin, you can chime in. So one of the things that kind of, and there's a few articles in the literature that deal with some of this already, but very few. But why social work and engineering? And as we started talking more and I started reading some of what was out there and Kevin explaining how they go about problem solving, a couple things were readily apparent. One, we actually tend to come at things from the same theoretical perspective, some kind of ecological or systems model perspective. And, that's kind of the main thing we learned right on social work, the first social work classes. And so we think about those things conceptually, and they're actually applying it to specific cases. So there's that piece. The next piece is really interesting. It's something I didn't even know existed until I met Kevin, but there's a whole field or subfield now of humanitarian engineering, and he's going to talk a little bit about what goes on there. In that space, there's a ton of crossover with social work, both at the international level, locally. So there's a lot of places we could collaborate in a very applied way from that systems framework. But as Kevin mentioned, the trick is learning how to communicate with each other and get on the same page and figure out how to work with each other in a practical way. The next bullet is one that's coming up more and more often, and that really is this idea that increasingly we're going to start seeing technological solutions to the kinds of problems we deal with in social work. There's a new app that was in the news the other day. I don't know how many of you saw the app that works on depression. Does anyone see that in the news? Right, so, oh yeah, you sent it to me. So basically someone's come up with this app that monitors the amount of communication you do on your phone, it monitors how active you are, and then it basically kind of gives a red flag for being depressed. There's other things out there right now that people are working on, but more and more we're going to start seeing these kinds of technologies creep into the social service world and the way we deliver interventions. It makes sense that the people that work on the people part of the problem work with the people that work on the technological part of the problem and get it to work together in a way that's coherent. And so I think that's another area that we have great potential. And then the last bullet is research, and we'll give you an example of something that we're working on. But it's really kind of a nice collaboration when you get someone who can do the mathematics of system dynamic and apply it to a social case. And so in my case, it's alcohol problems, but people are working in different problems with this type of modeling right now. And a lot of interesting things come out of that. And so I'll talk a little bit about that as we move on.
Well, one comment. One of the things that's been really, I've learned from John in discussions that's been fascinating for me is, so in the past I've worked with biologists. And biologists I love working with biologists, but they're scientists. And as a scientist, they want to uncover knowledge, period, okay? And but that's really doesn't seem to be the attitude here. I mean, sure, you're going to use science, of course. But John said to me once, this is applied social science. And it really hits home because engineering, some people say, is applied science. I mean, so when you people seem to have, when you read a book on social psychology, like group dynamics, or you read a book on from psychology, or not psychology, but some of these, like sociology, okay, it's always this, we're trying to understand. Whereas when I got some recommendations from Teresa and John and some others, read this, and the tone is really different because it's like, okay, we understand, now let's intervene. You guys have this word intervention you use all over the place. For us, that's what we do. I mean, that too. So actually the philosophy, like John is saying, is this way of thinking is really directed towards doing something, not just theorizing.
Right. All right.
Okay, so this is a very busy slide. And this is an experimental slide I'm trying on people. So let's look at the left side. The left side up there on the board, it looks like when I lecture, okay? And the bottom guy with the brain there with the gears. So in engineering, the tradition is to call a mechanical engineer a gearhead, okay? So it's sort of like all this technology and stuff and math and science floating around in the engineer's head. But on the other hand, you look at the right, well, that's one of our undergraduates, Mary Scher. She's an ECE undergrad. She's in Guatemala there, working with children for STEM education, okay? And so it's interesting. There's sort of this contrast then. It seems to me like social work's on the right,
care about people, help people. We've got social justice painted on your wall, oppressed, human rights. You don't find those words being used too much over in engineering. And so there's this people concern on this right side. On the left, you got all this technology. So what I've seen over the years with the students is they come in and they sort of have this split personality kind of thing going on. I want to help people, so I'm dumping engineering. I mean, I can give you an example. A person that joined, I don't know if she's here, she joined your college, dumped engineering because she wasn't convinced she could help people well enough in engineering. Okay? So this happens to us, and the typical student that I think could work cross with your college in engineering is a student that have these desires to be on the right versus left. Now, it turns out that the data show that women actually pick their careers early on in a way that they want to help people or society more than men, okay, and boys. And so what we find in our humanitarian engineering program is that's indeed coming out in a sense, because just to give you a little data, we have we have 3 Honduras programs going on since 2005. 198 OSU students have traveled. Half of them have been women. You say, oh, that seems reasonable, but we have 20% women in our college, okay? First time I've ever walked in to teach an engineering class last year, taught first time humanitarian engineering, walk in, it's half women. I was shocked. This is like, wow. So there's a diversity issue going on here that's important. Humanitarian Engineering Scholars is a 270 student program, freshman, sophomore, live in a dorm together, etc. I gave them a talk in the fall and I asked them, why do you want to be a humanitarian engineer? Why do you not want to be a humanitarian engineer? We took the data, with the words, made a word cloud. So you see the thing at the top, there's a reason. So usually the way you interpret this is you just read a sentence based on the big words. I want to help people around the world, okay? And the people that do not want to be humanitarian engineers are on the bottom. And you see what it says. I want work where I'll make a lot of money, okay? So essentially what our program is trying to do is bridge between the brain in the middle, between this sort of techno business world and help people, and we're trying to build those bridges. But it seems to me what this meeting is about, to me, is in some ways this too. I mean, that's presumptuous of me to assume that's the case because I don't understand the College of Social Work, but I don't know. My wife's a psychologist, my sister-in-law's a social worker, and I got this guy to help me out. but I think you can see the sort of dichotomy and then the need to bridge between these two. It's a need for us. We need social work to help us on the human side. So the center, Humanitarian Engineering Center, was set up last June. Basically, it's a research, education, service program. We've got courses going on for prep for international travel. We've got domestic and international programs for trips. We're running 9 trips this year internationally. A lot of those are study abroad trips. Then we have research going on about the Scholars Program, as I mentioned. We have 7 student organizations, College of Engineering, that focus on humanitarian service. And then the flags there are, okay, so we have programs going from left to right, down at Haiti, Guatemala, Honduras, Dominican Republic, of course the US, Colombia, South Africa, Ghana. The upper right, the first time is going to run this summer to Tanzania. The one on the upper left is El Salvador, and that's an old program. It ran for about 3 years. So we've got some pretty good reach around the world. We don't have a number of students. I mean, there's 270 humanitarian engineering scholar students, but there's a lot more in the program going on all these trips. These trips are probably, usually there are 10 to 15 students per trip times 9. So we're sending a lot of students abroad. In the model for how we typically work is we try to work on a specific thing such as water filtration or sanitation or electricity, and we have a specific project. They're doing projects on the ground, technology projects. So some ideas. Let's start talking about brainstorming. These came from discussions with John and reviewing your website, but there's some interest in student organizations to collaborate with your student organizations. This is a nice way to start. If this can work, it could happen locally. I don't know who does what in your student organizations. There's a lot of local service projects that are going on out of engineering, and I mean, they'd welcome the help, for sure.
Just for a second. So actually yesterday, two of Kevin's students came in and talked to me about a project they're doing where they have a competition to build a new shelter for homeless folks. And so we talked a little bit, but it seems to me it'd be a very natural kind of collaboration to put some of our students with some of the engineering students to really make sure that the needs of the homeless people are being taken into account. And then, the engineering students certainly come at it from their own angle, but they don't quite understand the people part of the problem like we wouldn't understand maybe the technological part of the problem. And so I actually threw that out to Kevin's students yesterday, and they said, oh yeah, next year let's try to put them together in teams. So I think there's a lot of openness on the part of their students to work with our students, and there's other opportunity down the road. I'll cut you off.
I mean, engineers know they're nerds. You got to get it, okay? So if we know we're nerds, and if we'll admit it, that means we don't deal with people well, right? There you have it. Not necessarily. I'm exaggerating, I know. But you get my point, though. I mean, there is an issue here. An engineer often is highly technically focused. When they're looking at this homeless problem, they're saying, "Oh, this is very confusing about this person." But the thermodynamics on this problem, I get, and I'm going to fix this thing. You know what I'm saying? So they are thinking differently. It's pretty weird, actually. But John, you want to do the next one, or
The clinic? Yeah, so this community technology clinic, was this going before the grant, the grant, two grants?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
Okay, so Kevin had this going before I met him, and then last year we've got a Betha grant and a outreach and engagement grant to develop this community technology clinic. And the concept right from the beginning has been a social work, engineering, community-based clinic to start using technological solutions to address immediate community needs. It's been slower startup than we probably would have liked, but we're probably it's this May,
This summer,
right?
yeah, this May we'll get going.
So
We're trying to get we don't have a building. We had a building thing and it fell through. But we were hoping to get some space for the building in the right kind of neighborhood. I think the idea is to embed so that you have people, you can understand people better in a local neighborhood and talk to people about challenges and issues.
So Kevin, and I know you were talking about like Franklinton
Yes.
area. Have you talked to any of the social service agencies? Like there's a Gladden Community House is there?
So we have, there's probably many we don't know about, but Gladden actually, we have a project with them right now. They're helping build derby cars for kids. But I don't know if they would, I haven't talked to them about this particular issue, but we did have some emails going on. I think it was Lisa Durham or somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's Shalom Zone.
Yeah, yeah.
there.
Right. That was a year ago or so. But there's been some talk, about different options here, and I think we're open. I mean, I don't think we necessarily need a building. I mean, I think it would be nice to have space for. There's a real big difference in the attitudes here about practicum and field work. Okay, that's not way we do that in engineering is they go get jobs in the summer for engineering industry. That's the practical, nothing else. So the idea of going out in the community like this, embedding yourself in the community is newer for the College of Engineering. That's different. We need to learn about that, really.
So at any rate, that's a work in progress. Because it's community-based and the types of issues we deal with will probably emerge from the community. So there could be potential for a bunch of different folks on our faculty or students to get involved with this as it evolves. We're hoping that the coordinator of the clinic will actually be an MSW social work person. So, we'll keep you posted on that as we move along.
So there's the clinic picture with just a few projects.
That they've done already, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the one in the bottom left, at Pamela Range, working with Kent Vitale and the Open Shelter, came up with this reflection strategy for candles to be used in a tent. And then the bottom right is a little cooking contraption that's safe. It's a hanger, and you can fold and unfold and put in your backpack. We've been building wheelchair ramps in the Columbus area for many years. It's been 16 of them now. And then what's been interesting for us is when we've walked into some of these service agencies, like Worthington Food Pantry, that's a picture in the right there. You say to them, we'd like to volunteer, do you have any technology needs? Wow, what a reaction from these people. I mean, it's incredible because they don't get that kind of volunteer. And so we did a logistics study, simulated the pantry and helped improve flow. So other places, we talk about websites, making a website, or we did a database thing for a local, Catholic Social Services, how to do a database for their service Saturday, to automate the whole thing that the students completed. So these are the things that are coming out, but like John said, we're just getting started. This is international. This is just a collage of pictures from all over the world, and I had to be very careful selecting these to try to avoid every picture not having OHIO. Okay, next slide.
All right. So these are, let's see, course stuff, right?
Yeah, so the first one's an idea, but we have courses supporting all our international programs, okay? We don't have any course for the local component of what we do. No faculty step forward to do it. And so, this is a slide to attempt you guys to talk you into it and invite our engineering students to join your class. Because if they do, then maybe you could do something innovative here. I really believe in grassroots sort of things. I mean, student organizations doing things, something like this, a lot will grow out of this kind of stuff if we can get it started. And I can tell you right now, you'll get takers on that first one from our engineering students if you do something like this and invite them. As long as you don't put up barriers like in terms of the prereqs, if it's possible to do that. I don't know if it is, but if it's possible, I'll bet, because the students have asked for this just this year. They're like, we don't get any course credit for all this stuff we're doing. Can we get course credit? I'm like, oh man, we can give them independent study.
And are you thinking undergrad
Yeah.
level?
I'd start undergrad, yeah. On that one, I mean.
Right, and so here's when Kevin first came, we started talking about maybe some of our students going and sitting through the humanitarian engineering course. I don't know what the prereqs for that are, but the prereqs for our courses, most of their students would be able to meet them if they weren't social work specific, especially at the undergrad level, where it might not always be the case. There'd be more of a math kind of prereq on their side, but I think it'd be kind of cool if we could get some of their students over here and learn a little bit more about social work. It would beef up the environment, or their humanitarian side.
Yeah, it would really help us, because if they take it as an undergraduate before they do an international thing or something like that, they're going to learn a lot. That knowledge is going to seep into our program. So I think it would be important. Actually, students can take the humanitarian engineering course because there's I insisted upon the prereqs being or permission of instructor. So any good student wants to do it, I'm going to let them in.
So what would the prereqs be without permission?
Oh, we kept it very low. It's essentially one semester of the freshman, I won't use course numbers, it's a initial introduction to engineering and design.
Okay.
And then, so this is second semester, it runs this semester. So I have 3 freshmen in there. I had 1 freshman last year. She was one of the top students in the class, and now she's a member of your college. That's the one I mentioned.
So you're recruiting for us, so good.
Thank you.
All right. Now this is much longer term for the dual masters, but Kevin noticed that we have a ton of dual master's degrees. And at some point, and if you think about the challenges here, this is where we'd have to really solve the math issue. But for social work students in this crossover, it's kind of a very interesting idea. I don't know, you know.
I'm not sure how it could work, but one of the things, OSU has an official dual MS degree, official by the graduate school. And so the question becomes, all right, if an engineering student gets a dual degree and part of it's social work, can we make that work? Okay, and then the other problem is, are there enough engineering courses that are accessible to make it work? I actually think there are going to be the humanitarian engineering course, and then you go over to computer science and take some software IT things. I think you can do it. Now, maybe Nate could come on this more, but I don't know if it's possible, but
So the dual degrees, I'm on the grad school curriculum committee and have been for a number of years, and frequently there might be, like more engineers interested in it than social work students interested in it, but that's okay.
yeah, that's true.
It doesn't necessarily have to be, equal back and forth.
I think that's true, and I think that my intuition on this is that there's a lot of our humanitarian engineering students would be interested in this because, well, they like the international stuff. They find it very attractive. Go see the world, But when they think about it carefully, like, am I going to live in developing country X? They want to be right here, and they want to do this stuff. So I think we'll get some takers.
Yeah, the other piece I think there's an easy one to start with is some guest lectures. And so for those of you that teach a course where you think this might be an interesting topic for Kevin or somebody to come in and talk about humanitarian engineering as kind of a potential collaborator for us, I went in and did the social work spiel in his class. So it'd be nice maybe if we can think about that, just even starting to expose students to these different ideas as well as faculties, which we're doing now. So research, you want us to say the first part and then I'll walk through our thing.
Oh, okay. Here's just a list of a bunch of ideas. So community or group theory, I mean, I think you guys handed me 5 books. The International Handbook on Social Work, Holman's book on promoting community change, Dale and Smith's social systems theory. I'm not going to remember every one of them, but those were 3 of them.
Better than I could do.
Okay, and so it's fascinating to read that stuff because the social systems theory, and then the group psychology, social psychology viewpoint on group dynamics is really fascinating for us because it's distributed dynamical systems from our perspective. And you guys talk about feedback, and we love that stuff. And, interactions, complex systems, etc. So, and then we like to think about this as not just people, but having technologies. So in other words, people holding cell phones and what are the implications for communication and all that. So we sort of think of we call it a socio-technological system. And so John's going to talk about the research on one example of this. But in the apps area, John brought that up already, but this really seems to be a trend. It's just fascinating to see the breadth already of apps coming out. Just get on your phone and search the App Store or whatever. You pick your mental illness and type it in, and you'll find. Well, my wife 2 weeks ago said, we were talking about this. She says, "Oh, I show my clients this all the time. Insight Timer. I don't know if anybody's heard of that. The bang the bowl and wing, all this mindfulness and so." No, it's cool stuff. I'm not making fun of it. It's cool stuff. But mental health issues, I think there's some potential. I mean, Keith Warren had discussed last year that he felt there was potential too. So people are really talking about this, for instance, for substance abuse. Global information systems. Last year, John had this idea about information technology for integrating wide area service provision. So that means you link the providers, the homeless shelters, the pantries, soup kitchens, etc. Pull it all together into one system, and there's a lot of advantages to doing that with respect to scheduling, with respect to, I got a tour of the homeless camps last year, 6 of them, and one of the persons was telling me about the ID problem. getting your ID stolen, and you know, could you scan somebody's ID in and have it in the system so they can just show up, you look, you match, you don't have to have the thing. So there seems to be a lot that could be done there, but it's not clear who would do that. That's not my kind of stuff.
Right, and so that's Tom is working on that a little bit for substance abuse, but what we're thinking is even larger. But if you imagine taking clients and the programs they're eligible for and all the kind of eligibility criteria, populating a smart system, matching it with the resources available in the community, it's a matching problem that a lot of social workers do. I mean, think of my wife right now. She's doing it by hand. It's phone calls and knowing what this agency does. So having the ability to have a smart system that can go out and say, yeah, actually, there's 2 beds here for this, or there's still 2 slots here and this person meets the eligibility, be a really big kind of contribution to the field. So these guys could do the technical part. We'd have to do the part about pulling in all the crazy social service rules and regulations around.
So Linda Helm and Denise actually got funding to get wireless iPads last year. And one of the things they've been able to do with that is leverage like the benefits bank. So they can, you know, the students can work with clients in their home. But, you know, I'm sure they have a list of a million other things that they would also like to have.
Right.
You know, for this IT problem, it's really not clear how to approach it. If it's all off-the-shelf technology, it may not fit at all in our college. The faculty may not touch it when they're doing research, you know. But the question is can you start small on some pieces and then write the big grant, right? And hire it out.
Yeah, well, we should talk about this later, but there's potential foundations that might fund this kind of a development and I don't know the answer if there's an off-the-shelf solution to this. I'm guessing there's not, since we don't have anything like this.
I actually worked on a project like this in Nashville a number of years ago, but it was never going anywhere.
I think people have tried it, it's just
But
not,
the
yeah.
technology is much better.
Yeah.
There is actually here in Franklin County a hospital bed board that was created because of the crisis in psychiatric bed availability. So all of the institutions that have psychiatric beds every day,
Update.
they created technology for a hospital bed board where they can actually slot people into places where there's a free bed. So there is a model that could potentially be helpful in thinking through how you would connect some of this
Right.
social services.
You know, there's so many, it seems to be everybody we talk to has another idea that's a good idea along these lines. And we're working with mental health, Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction. They want us to create a computer program that will automatically send texts to people that have been in for suicide and then let go and they're recurring. I mean, it's daunting. It seems like you need a technology institute. I mean, to really take this on would require a major effort. I mean, picking at little pieces is good, but somehow who's going to pull this thing together? It seems, and then what a company would do then is take, let's say, the Columbus, Ohio thing and sell it to pick your closest size city. Okay, I don't know, and then expand it and make money on the thing.
So corporate kind of funding of so there's a bunch of ways to kind of approach these things, but obviously bigger discussions, but there's I think a lot of ground for a lot of the work that we're all doing to kind of think about these things in a way that some of the things that think, wouldn't it be cool to do this, there's actually people out there that we can partner with to try to make it happen.
I would also say that NSF has started they have money now to do the social component, but we haven't partnered with anyone to know,
Yeah.
can we make that happen? The other thing is being very sensitive to getting some of your master's and doctoral students involved and making sure that they can then publish off of that, because I take all kinds of issues to my computer science colleague, and he's like, I can't publish off that. And so I think that may be.
Talk about that in a second here, actually. So
That's a real issue. And it's not only just, is it publishable in the journal? Will it get accepted? But it's also, there's all the HIPAA stuff going on, and, this is complicated stuff.
All right, so I think the next slide's going to, yes, this is a little bit of the research stuff. So this is what Kevin and I and Felipe, his doctoral student up here, have been working on for a while. Yeah, you can't really see the arrows that well on that screen, but so basically what we decided to do is take some of the work I'd been working on. Right now we're working on a data set that I brought from San Diego, where I studied people in 32 bars around the San Diego area, and we were going out at night. We were doing observational study in the bar. We were doing what was called the portal study, where we randomly select people going into the bar in groups. We'd interview them, breathalyze them, put a hospital bracelet on them, catch them on the way back out, and breathalyze them again and interview them again. So we were able to get the kind of environmental impact on their blood alcohol or their drinking behavior. And while they were in the bar, I actually had observers embedded in the bar looking at environmental characteristics. So we had all these levels of data, and we published a number of things out of that study. We also did 240 college parties, which that's a whole other story, I'll tell you sometime. Anyway, using standard hierarchical linear modeling kind of thing. So I started to talk to Kevin about some of the work he'd done with the biologist, and they were doing swarm behavior in bees, which seems about as far away from that. Except if you look at a college party, it looks a lot like a swarm. So there's dynamics going on involved in this. And so the more we talk, we figured out that there's actually some opportunities to do some system dynamic simulations. So the framework that we're kind of looking at is we start out with theory, and these simulations tend to be the theory is crucial in this. So you have to start with a good theory and understand how the mechanism should theoretically work. We have some data in this case to populate it. We run some simulations, and then that should inform the next phase where we go back out and collect more field data with new hypotheses, new questions, and then refine the model or validate the model. And so we kind of see this as a process. And I know you might comment on your experience with the biologist, but for me, my thinking about the problem I've been working on for 15 years has jumped about tenfold in the time I've been working with Kevin. Because to do these models really requires, since we're speaking different languages, really requires me to think through every little nuance of what's happening and what the theoretical causal chain should be, and what the interactions are, and how we might explain it this way or look at it that way. And so you start to really hone in on what you were doing, whereas you're doing it in a kind of survey way or an observational way, you're not always thinking at that level of depth. So I think that it's just the process of doing this kind of collaboration is helping move my little subfield forward. On my little subfield, there's probably one other group working on this kind of modeling right now. Ironically, our new faculty member, Bridget's working with them on modeling marijuana distribution in Southern California, so contact with the same kind of folks. But at any rate, I think we're going to see more and more of this. And NIH is very interested in simulations, computational models, system science stuff. So we're going to see more of this in the future, I think. If you looked at SWIR, you're starting to see more of these things kind of slowly creep into the abstracts. It's still not a huge amount of people doing it, but you're starting to see it. So, all right, so let's give you the specific example here. So I mentioned the bar thing. Well, one of the things we asked in the bar study was what the person's motivation was for the evening. And we had a series of questions, and there was a scale that basically asked them, did they want to get drunk? Did they get real drunk? Just a slight buzz, not drunk at all, et cetera, et cetera. Well, when you start looking at these data, what you start to see is that people's intentions don't always fit what happened. Okay, so the reality doesn't always match the intention. And the other thing I should say here is we had measured a lot at the person level and a lot at the environment level, but we didn't have a lot at the group level. I just have really basic group data, how many people and what the gender composition was. So I don't have like a lot of what goes on at the group level, which is a crucial thing. The reason for that honestly is we just didn't have enough money to do that in the study. So that, this was a really expensive study just to get what we got. If adding the group piece to it would have cost another $1 million probably, and I would have had to double my
That's
staff.
why Danielle's gonna get that.
Yeah, she's doing that for us. So it's her dissertation. She'll be here forever. So anyway, so in talking with these guys and then looking at the literature, we were able to kind of figure out that we could use some theoretical assumptions to look at the effect of what the group would have been had we been able to measure it. So I'm able to now answer some questions about something that I didn't actually have the opportunity to empirically observe, which is kind of cool. And this will give us some pilot for when we go out for the next grant. And it's not just me saying, well, there's a theory the group should behave this way. We can actually show that mathematically it should operate this way. All right, so these are just some examples of simulations. And I should almost let you explain this, but
Yeah, you, go ahead.
do you want to jump in? Felipe ran them all, so I don't want to put you on the spot. Yeah. Wait.
So that
Isn't
network
that
that
right?
is on the right is just an influence network. So the arrows indicate which people is influencing other people. Actually, the arrows should be in the other direction.
Okay.
So that's my bad. And the thickness of the arrows indicate how strong is that influence. So, for example, subject number 3 is influencing number 4, and that influence is stronger than, for example, the influence of 3/1. And then, which case is it?
So yeah, so just
Okay.
I'll
Do you
just
see it?
pipe in for a second. So basically what we're doing is taking that first slide, why reality doesn't match the motivation, is the idea that people influence each other in groups in different ways. And so if you make some assumptions about the direction of peer influence, that you can drag someone who didn't want to get drunk into being drunk, and vice versa. So depending on where you start and your motivation, the influence of a group matters different depending on how strong the influence is and the number of different relationships in the network. So that's kind of what this first one's showing. So, the people that are the blue lines, or maybe you said we flipped it, but it doesn't really matter theoretically. So the people with the blue lines are people that didn't want to get drunk. People with the red lines are people that wanted to get drunk. And then this is simulated over time, right? So the farther, maybe you want to explain how the initial condition part, so the far,
I think
yeah.
we have case 3.
Yeah, I do. So here's another one.
Okay. So if you see, even though number
But,
4.
wait a minute. Define the axes for people. It's a little
Okay.
hard to see from a distance.
Yeah, in this case, the axis can be the level of alcohol, for example.
The level of alcohol.
The blood alcohol.
Blood alcohol level.
Yeah, and then we can see that, for example, the agent that is on the left, the very left, it's number 4. So even though number 4 is being influenced by number 3, number 4 is already close to not being drunk. So that agent prefers to stay not drunk. And if you see it in the trajectory, it tries to move to be closer to number 3, but actually goes back and goes to the position of being not drunk. And since 4 is influencing 5, then the other blue agents try to poke number 4.
Right, so what you can start doing with these things is theoretically saying if people have this initial condition and their BAC's here and their motivation is this, and they interact with this type of a group, this is the likely outcome. So you're able to play around theoretically with how things might play out in the real world. And then the next step, of course, is when we go out, and this is what we're going to start doing this summer, or whenever the IRB approves it, is actually starting to follow natural groups and watch their drinking behavior and see how this plays out in the real world. So the idea is to validate some of this as we move on.
Do you want to talk about your technology, though, with doing that?
Oh, yeah. So when I started this line of research back in the late 90s, early 2000s, there was a lot of limitations technologically, right? We interviewed people in the field. At the time, we were using these handhelds that looked like the size of this keyboard, just big clunky things. Of course, now that's all changed. But we were only able to breathalyze people with breathalyzers, and that, even at the time, was a fairly new innovation, because the old breathalyzer machines were giant. You know, in the old days, the ones that were in police cars weren't very reliable. So if you got arrested for DUI, you'd get brought in and you'd be breathalyzed in the station. So then handheld breathalyzers came out and made that possible to do field studies like this. Well, now, one of the things that, if you think about the methodology that, as I described it, what I was really getting was kind of a cross-section of a drinking event, right? I got their time in, their time out, 2 slices in time of when people were drinking, and because of the way we designed it, we were able to look at the environmental influence. What I didn't necessarily have is the trajectory of the entire drinking event. And now technology's come along where they've come up with transdermal blood alcohol monitors, which are about the size of a watch. And it basically goes on your wrist, and it gives you your BAC from the time you start drinking to the time you stop. So now I can actually monitor, when people go out, what their blood alcohol looks like. Other things that have come up in between, now we're much better. Everyone has a smartphone. Back when I was doing this study, believe it or not, in 2007, 8 or whatever, the Razr phone was about the best, right? It was pre-iPhone. So you couldn't really do ecological momentary assessments in the field easily. To text stuff, if you had to punch the button 3 times to get to a certain level, couldn't do it. Nowadays, with everyone having a smartphone that also has a GPS in it, that also has all these other things, we're going to be able to track people's BAC over time and location. I found some other technology the other day that's the radio sensing stuff, that if you send a group out together, not only will be able to tell that they are in the same bar, which a GPS would give you, I'm going to be able to tell how close they physically are to each other. So if you went out as a natural drinking group, I'm going to be able to tell in the bar, did they split up and are they doing different things in the bar, etc. So there's the amount of data that we're going to be able to get to explain these kind of complex environmental person group level interactions and dynamics is now exponentially higher than it was even a couple years ago. Now, if you think about that from the way we were trained as social workers, statistically, this becomes a difficult problem for us to handle. And I always kind of felt when I was doing this, even though I was using hierarchical linear modeling, which at the time was kind of cutting edge for social work, that we're making some assumptions about, 1, is this really linear? 2, what kind of interactions happen? 3, what about this time dimension? And it goes on and on and on. And then you think about variance unexplained. The new technologies out there that are available to us are going to let us kind of look at behavior in real time, with the idea that you intervene closer to the behavior that you're trying to prevent, you're more likely to have a successful outcome. So if you think about like prevention now, if you're trying to prevent alcohol and drug problems, we do it in a way where it's almost like an inoculation. We're going to try to get someone before it happens, but way before it happens, right? So, you're teaching them skills and different things. Now, hopefully what this will lead to is, if we know someone's in these sorts of situations and these characteristics are going, we can use technology to maybe interrupt that behavior chain in a way to push them off the trajectory that will pull them from blue to red. So that's really where this is all going. And the idea would be using mobile technology to do some of this. So that's the end of that. Now we have some time for discussion. Went a little longer than we thought, but we'll open it up to any of the areas and anything anybody wants to pitch, talk about, whatever. And hopefully we'll do this again where we do more of these brainstorming things for people that are interested.
I just have a question in terms of, advancing research in this area. It's a little overwhelming to think about starting a project like this. So for example, if I wanted to model the influence of social interactions among clinicians over time and how that influences their practice, that one could imagine how that is a nonlinear, at least using a particular practice might be a nonlinear, sort of like an S-shaped curve type of phenomenon, right? Influenced by social dynamics within an organization and across organizations, right? Where on earth do you start? Because you need longitudinal data to do that. So, and that's resource and time intensive. How on earth do you start?
Well, so here's a couple examples. So the other group that's doing, and you feel free to pipe in here, but the other group that's doing agent-based modeling in my area doesn't have any field data. So they're doing this all computationally based on theoretical assumptions, and they're building these models based on the literature. And so if you were to partner with a modeler, you get a place to start. Interesting enough, getting hooked up with them, they didn't have half of the studies we did in the field, so now their models are going to improve based on field data. But you got to think of it, go back to that slide where everything everything relates to everything else, theory, practice, and simulation. It doesn't really matter where you start in there, I think. I mean, I don't know, how'd the B situation go?
Oh, yeah, that's, well, let me come back, though, to your initial question. With situations like that, a lot of fields right now are moving to in the internet to gather longitudinal data. And in particular, if you can create a closed social network among clinicians, where the clinician joins under the agreement that this is a scientific study. Now, you got to incentivize them to get them to join, right? But you could probably find a way to incentivize them. So what you need is somebody to program that net, and you set it up, and you run it. I mean, this is happening around the social sciences, this kind of thing. I'm not saying it's easy to do. I'm just saying that I would approach it that way, that you just approach it, say, I'm going to do the experiment design. This is what I want. And then you work with someone that could create that software system to do the full automation of the gathering of the data. That data is really hard to gather. But what you're basically, is it feasible? Sure, this is feasible because I can count email messages and their length, right? I can count, this is trivial to count. This is simple algorithms. I can count if they're corresponding another way via text, etc. I can count that. I can count lengths of phone calls. You can count it all, and you can already have a statistical study then. And then you can have them rate, as a clinician, the value. You can have likes, right? Concepts from Facebook, etc., social media. So you get clinicians, they're sharing information, and then you ask the person, click like. I learned, right? I learned on a scale. And boom, and before you know it, you got way too much data. I think you're going to find is you got way too much data, actually. Yeah.
So, one, can you define ecological momentary assessment? And then my second question is, Facebook just came out with this depression thing and suicide risk. What ways do you think that we can engage Facebook or other social media to let us come in and evaluate whether or not that's working? Because the way that it came out is there is no evaluation. They have no idea what's going to happen with that.
Okay, first one, ecological momentary assessment's a technique where you do very short live surveys, either at subscribed intervals that are theoretically important or at random intervals with people. So it's like you'd hit, if someone's, and taking it to the drinking example, because we're going to know where they're drinking because they're going to have GPS on them, every time they move from one place to another, I'm going to be able to hit them with a text, kind of little short thing. Why are you leaving the place you're leaving? Where are you heading? How are you getting there? So assuming that transportation's important, I'm trying to prevent drunk driving, let's say. So that's what that does. It's just, it tends to be, you can do it in a lot of different ways, but now everyone's doing it by text. Total aside, the university just bought the site license for Qualtrics. There's a function in there that does this in the new Qualtrics. So we all have access to that if you want to do it in your field. The Facebook thing, and I don't know if you have any insight on it, you know, they got in big trouble for experimenting on people in the past. I think they're a little bit less likely to, I don't know how to do that. Twitter, though, will give you tweets. They have a whole research arm. I have a buddy in San Diego who's doing a bunch of stuff with Twitter. And you just tell them the content you want, and they'll strip off the person, so it's de-identified, and they'll give you the tweets with the geographic stamp and the time stamp if they have it, so.
Can you just talk for a moment about the Engineering, Technology, Human Affairs, and Social Justice Columbus to Columbia project?
Oh, okay. We leave on Saturday morning. Felipe can tell you a lot. Felipe's from Colombia, from Ibagué. But basically, what we're doing with Colombia is a program that's going on for quite a few years, but we're taking students there now. It's basically STEM education, K through PhD. So we're working with children in a disadvantaged school to teach STEM ideas, and then we're working with universities to try to develop low-cost university engineering experiments. This is an unusual project of the 9. This is the only one like it. I mean, focused on education. So the idea is we're going to enable people and let them work on their own issues. That's basically the philosophy. The other programs are working with people on the ground to install water filtration or a cook stove, or so it's a little unusual.
We'll do one more question, but Kevin told me something really cool. In Colombia, they actually pair MSW or social work practitioners with engineers, and they send them out to people's houses to come up with solutions for the problems they have in their house.
We walk in last summer to this organization and look over, and there's this trailer, big trailer. On the side of it, it says, Ingenieros a su casa, and engineers to your house. I'm like, what? And so I turn around and ask the guy, and he's like, oh, that's our program. We send an engineer, a social worker, and a business person to help a person in their home. They assess the whole thing and help them out. We're like, wow, what an idea.
So people are doing it already. It's just we're not. Any other questions? Probably have time for one more comment. All right, cool. Well, thank you for coming. It's a great turnout, and hopefully the first one.